Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about the teachings of the world as compared to the teachings of the Bible and why the teachings in the world are wrong. One of the things that the world teaches is that if we're guilty of a particular sin, we should never ever look at somebody else and tell them that they shouldn't commit that same sin, because then we would be a hypocrite. In particular, the world does this in regards to uh, whether or not we should tell people that they are wrong when they commit particular sexual sins. One particular instance would be parents and their children. Parents shouldn't tell their children to avoid particular sexual sins because they may have been guilty of those particular sexual sins themselves. Well, this is really wrong thinking and non-biblical thinking, and the reason is because if we can't oppose sin, which is harmful to people, then how can we stand for anything? How can we stand for what is right if we can't tell people that what they are doing is wrong? And especially because sin hurts people, it harms. And not only, say, if our children are guilty of sexual sin, it not only harms them, but it harms people around them too. So even if we are guilty of particular sexual sins, we still have to tell our children to do what is right, expect them to do what is right. And that is what God expects of us as parents to do with our children. Now, I just want to bring up a particular instance in Scripture that illustrates this. Um, in Galatians 2, you see Paul calling a lot of the leaders of the church hypocrites. And the reason he's calling them hypocrites is because they're telling Gentiles who are coming into the church that in order to belong to the church, they have to be circumcised like the Jews. And in particular, Paul calls James, Barnabas, and Peter hypocrites for their stance on this issue. In other words, they themselves don't obey the laws put forth by the Jewish leaders, but they expect other people to do it. So my point here is that the leaders of the church were told by Paul that they were being hypocrites, and of course they were being hypocrites. Now in 1 Peter 2, this is a letter Peter is writing to the church. Peter says, "Therefore rid yourselves of all malice, all deceit, and all hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind." So here you see Peter, who has been guilty of hypocrisy in the past. We see this in Paul's letter, telling people not to be hypocrites. So clearly in Scripture, here's a particular instance where someone who is guilty of a particular sin is telling other people to avoid it. Therefore, God must want us to tell other people to avoid sins that we ourselves have committed. Not only those sins, but all sins, because the reason being is that sin is harmful to people. You should never stand by and say, well, you're committing sin, you're living with your boyfriend or girlfriend, but it's okay because I did it too. It's not okay. It's harmful. It's still harmful. It was harmful to you when you did it, and it's harmful to your children when they did it. So we should all stand for what is right and what is obedient to God, because that is the only way that we can bear good fruit and that people will at least be warned about the harmfulness of sin and that there are consequences for committing it. Thank you for listening.